Hello, everybody. Greetings and salutations. Welcome back to another episode of the Back of the Pack podcast. I'm your host, Kyle Walker. My pleasure to be with you as always. So I want to first address the most amazing news, in my most humble opinion. Last week, what did we talk about? Last week, we talked about what we do with disappointment and what was the practice that I said we would do. Something bad happened. Something good comes from it. So for me, what did I say last time? I didn't get in the charity bib for Boston that I first tried for. What good happened? I got in on number 2. I am going to the Boston Marathon. I am so stinking excited. Man, if at first you don't succeed, try again. Let's go. So I am sorry. Please forgive my excitement. I just found out right before I started recording this, and I am just over the moon happy right now with how this turned out. So I'm going to be running for the official Boston Athletic Association, their charity. They are the people that run the race. This is their charity. It is not a charity that works with the Boston Athletic Association. It is the Boston Athletic Association. I interviewed with them earlier this week. They liked my story. They liked what I could do to try and raise money for their charity. And I'm so excited to do it. So please keep an eye on our social media because I cannot do this without your kind help and contribution. That information is coming. But man, this is going to be so much fun as we all kind of walk through the process together to get to Hopkinton, Massachusetts on April 17th, 2023. So, man, I am so excited. I'm going to put that on the back burner for right now. For this very moment, we have a special guest with us this week. So we are still deadheading towards the Garmin Kansas City Marathon. And I wanted to bring someone in who knows kind of what they're talking about when it comes to injury and rehab and personal training and marathon training and just dealing with all of that. So for this episode, we're actually going to bring in 2 guests. You're going to meet our producer, Katie, because she has a personal story with the personal trainer that we're going to bring in. His name is Pete. So you're going to hear her story and how she and Pete worked together to overcome a very serious back injury. And then we're going to talk to Pete about really running and just kind of your preparedness as you get ready to run. This is a pre-recorded interview, so I'm just letting you know what's coming. So please stick with us. We got personal story, we've got runner information, and there were definitely a lot of laughs as we recorded this interview. So I want to thank both Katie and Pete for coming on the podcast with us. I think you guys are going to find the story very compelling and then the running information very helpful. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and kick it over to our interview. This is myself with Katie and Pete here on the Back of the Pack podcast. All right, everybody, we have a very special guest at this point, at this moment, in this moment in time on this wonderful podcast of ours. We are finally, after long last and 30 episodes, going to introduce you to the producer of this here show.
Yay!
I say her name every week. Everybody welcome. This is Katie O'Neill, producer of the Back of the Pack podcast. Hi, Katie.
Hi, Kyle.
And how are you?
I'm doing lovely. Thank you for asking. Very interesting being on this side of the microphone.
Yeah, I'll bet it is. And you have to listen to me all the time. Now people can listen to you. And, you know, when everyone wants to send in the hate mail, they can start directing it to you and not me. And it'll be great, right?
But I'm told all the time that you are the talent. So I leave that to you, my friend.
Only one person tells you that, and that's me. Anyway, the reason Katie is here, everyone, we're continuing the march to the Garmin Kansas City Marathon. And one of the big deals that you have to worry about in fall marathon training season or any marathon training season are injuries and injury prevention. And so to do that, a lot of people will enlist the help of professionals. And that's what we're going to talk about today. So Katie, you have a guest and you have a story. Dive right in.
I do. And it's a crazy story, mostly for me. But I was very lucky to have this particular person in my life, amongst a few others, who helped me through a very traumatic sports injury that left me pretty much unable to walk for quite a while. So I'm here to introduce my personal trainer, one of the owners of Upstate Performance Project. He and his wife own this. This is Pete Townley. Hi, Pete.
Hello. Thank you. Thanks for having me here.
Very nice to have you on.
Yeah.
So I don't have to listen to Kyle so much when I'm editing later.
That's why it's great to have multiple guests on the show. Less of me, more of other people. It's awesome.
Saves everybody.
Absolutely.
So Pete, when I met you, gosh, we're talking maybe 1 or 2 years ago, or 10 or 15 or 20, but who's counting really? So it's been a minute. Mm-hmm. So do you want to tell people kind of how we met?
Sure. Yeah. So I want to say it was around 2004, 5-ish. Well, it had been 2006. I was the wellness director at a hospital system in Ottawa, Kansas. We had a physical therapy center, and my job, not as a physical therapist, but using my athletic training, sports injury background, and personal training background, kind of served as a gap between those individuals that were post physical therapy. They've kind of graduated from that, but still needed assistance in getting back into doing normal exercises and strengthening and things like that. And so that's where I met you. And that's how we started working together more on the personal training side, getting you back stronger and getting, not only working with strengthening the back, but just getting you walking and mobile and just being functional again.
Yeah. So basically, to give a little background there, Pete mentioned my back. And that's exactly what my issue was. I was a rower at K-State University. Yeah, go Cats. Anyway, so I was a rower back at K-State, and we were in the middle of a mock race getting ready for one of our races. And the girl behind me did what's called catching a crab, lost control of her oar. She was not able to alert people in time. That oar slammed into the small of my back, going very fast on a lake in the middle of Manhattan. Unfortunately, it did a lot of damage. I screamed very loudly across the lake, and my coach heard me across the lake, stopped us, and I was dragged out of the boat nicely. And then basically we didn't know how much damage was caused at that time. So it wasn't really looked after, wasn't really taken care of until years later, where apparently I had done so much damage to the nerve in my back, it was getting pinched inside my spinal column. So because of that, I could only move certain ways or certain amount of ways before the pain was too much that I couldn't move. So between Pete and my physical therapist, Megan, they worked so hard, kept on me, and really with so much care and so much patience, really helped get me back to where I needed to be able to do some more on my own. Because at that point, I wasn't able to do a lot on my own. So with that, we did a lot of like pool exercises, right, Pete? I mean, that was kind of the best way for me with such a bad back issue to be able to move and not cause so much pressure on my spine.
Yeah, we had to have that decompression because standing for any length of time, obviously no squatting or deadlifting at that point in the beginning, anything that was going to compress the spine at all was just out. And so we had to figure something out. And we had a Swimex pool, which is an endless current. So you could turn the current on and swim or walk or aqua jog against it. Or we also had little steps there, so you could step up and do squats and lunges and really do all kinds of stuff, paddles for upper body resistance. And it was a really neat piece of equipment that honestly, for such a small town as Ottawa was, and even back then, to have something like that was pretty unique to that area. So we were lucky to have it, and we used it, probably the first year or so, almost exclusively.
Yeah. And if I recall correctly, and tell me if I'm wrong, which I never am, right, Kyle?
Never ever.
But you could also actually go below the pool, right? And you could see how I was doing underneath the water, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, there are different panels on one side. There are 3 different panels. And so as a live coach, I could either be down there and watch and just see it in real time. We also had cameras that we had hooked up to a computer, and I could watch on the computer, so I could talk to her look at the computer to make sure that hips and knees and everything were tracking and moving correctly. Yeah, it was a neat piece of equipment, but really helpful to make sure below the surface of the water to make sure everything was going well. And we didn't use the cameras a whole lot. It was easier really just to get down and just see in real time. If you were doing testing, we could film it and then go back and watch it and edit it on there. But or more often than not, just went and looked at it in real time.
I think at this point I can like tread water for hours. It's it's actually kind of therapeutic for me now. Yeah. But it was a struggle then. And you know, I think part of having a personal trainer is also having somebody who knows you and can get to know you and takes the time to understand your psyche as well as what your physical injuries are. Because that was such a big thing too, is when you got down to it, that person has to do it themselves no matter what. They have to have the will to keep going to make themselves better. And when you have a personal trainer and a connection like we you're still my friend, that helped so much. Yeah, I think.
Well, and you're exactly right. The big thing with personal training, and I'll specify that. I mean, it can happen in a coach athlete scenario as well, with a team and individuals. But when you were talking personal training, that is a huge factor, because regardless of what your goal is, let's say your goal is not rehab, it's I just want to gain muscle or lose a few pounds. Whatever got you out of shape or off track may not just be, I don't know what to do. It could be some trauma, whether that's physical or emotional, or, there's a whole host of things that got you to the point where you are now. And if I write a great workout program and give you some nutrition tips, that will help. And that might move us in the right direction, but it may never solve the cause of the problem. And, I may or may not be, as a personal trainer, qualified to fix that part of it, but we can at least address it and get to know it. And a lot of times, like in your and I's scenario, I got to know you well. I mean, we were the pool was in the back. We would be sitting there for an hour, multiple times a week. I got to know you, know about your kids. You got to know about my kids, and we would talk. And that really, like you said, I got to know what made you tick. I knew how to push your buttons in the way to get you working harder, but not be the drill sergeant, not make it something you didn't want to come to. Right. But we were able to really realize why you were doing it. What did you want to be able to get done? Yes, you didn't want pain. You didn't want to live with the pain, but playing with your kids and having a life with the kids and doing things with those children is a huge motivator, as I recall. And, that to me resonated as a father myself. Like, yeah, that was everything. So once you know that, you can make adjustments in the program saying, okay, look, we know exactly where we need to go. And I know what's going to motivate her, and I know what's going to get her going. So you had a bad day, I could remind you of that. Not in a bad way, like, what would your kids think? But more like, hey, remember, you want to pick them up and throw them. They were youngsters at this point.
Yeah.
I don't know if you're picking them up now, but
oh God, no.
Getting to know, and that's the name of the game, personal training. It would imply I would know my clients personally, not just have them come in my 7 to 8 o'clock, boom, they're done. Then the next person, 8 to 9, boom, they're done. You get to know people. We talked a little bit before we started recording. I've had a 15-hour day already today. So I think in that 15 hours today, I saw 11 clients. So 11 conversations, 11 different people that I've communicated with and bonded with and had that connection with. And it's emotionally draining sometimes on me, but at the same time, I've got to get to that level with those clients. The X's and O's, I didn't invent the squat. I didn't invent any of the pool exercises you and I did. It was making sure I chose the right ones that were going to motivate you. If I knew you hated something, I could switch it up. But
or make me do more.
Or that's just been on how you responded, right?
Right.
But yeah, so getting to know them is key. And I would say, beyond, I won't say any credential, but beyond a lot of credentials that are out there, having that personality and that personal connection is huge.
Yeah, I totally agree. And it definitely helped so much for me. And I can't thank you enough. You almost had me crying there for a second mentioning my kids. Gonna make a girl cry. But
Truth hurts.
I know it really does. In my case, it really hurt.
But her back doesn't anymore, so that's a
But
good
my
thing.
back is awesome. And that's also because I also had some really great medical people in my life too. But honestly, I would not have been walking. I would not have been on my 2 feet had it not been for Pete and Megan. And I continue to say I'm going to make them t-shirts that just say Team Katie on it. But I feel like 15 years later, we're probably past the point of that. But I'm still going to make you a shirt, Pete. It's probably a say back of the pack on it now. Maybe Team Katie on the back, but we could talk.
And I can speak for Megan. I worked with her for 6 years. She's had 1 million clients before and after you, and as have I. But, there are clients that stick out, and there are clients, you look back as, successes or maybe failures or troubled ones. I mean, there's some that stick out for various reasons. But honestly, I know Megan and would agree that it was your determination and drive to get better. I mean, and that may come from your athletic background. You just have that very goal-oriented approach to physical activity, whether it's therapy or working out or whatever, or a hybrid of the two. But it's clients like you or patients like you that make our job easier, and it makes it fun because we can kind of pull out all of our bag of tricks and really push you in different ways. And that helps you get there faster, but it's also makes it fun for us too, because, it's a two-way street.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you guys always had me smiling by the end of the day, regardless of how tired or how much we had to get into a little bit of pain, maybe, or, whatever the day took. I still ended up leaving with a smile on my face, which is great.
Yeah.
So talking about stuff like that, and, I know I could not really have prevented my accident because it was a very long wooden oar to my back. But for this podcast purposes, we have a lot of runners out there who right now are training for this marathon that we've got coming up. Now, I do not run. I have only been actually walking really well for about the last year, and I'm not quite to running. So I leave that to Kyle, along with, the podcast talking and talent thing. But we do have our runners that are getting ready for these marathons. What is some advice that you might have for them to keep them from getting hurt?
A couple things right off the bat, a couple easy ones too. Well, easy to understand, not easy to carry out. Consistency is number one. Follow your plan. Whether you're online, you pull someone's half marathon training program and you're going to run that, or you had a running coach write you a program, wherever you get your program, whatever you're doing, follow that program. I think a lot of times people get off base, especially when you're talking marathon training. You're going to have 3 to 4 runs through the week and then a long run on the weekend. Typically, it's real easy to skip a couple of those midweek runs and be like, I'll make it up. I'll do that long run on the weekend. And so that mileage during the week is there for a reason. And I can get into the whole science part of it if you want your listeners to fall asleep, but there is a reason for it. It's there for a purpose. The long runs won't go as well if you haven't done the prep work. And so that's where the injuries start to come in, some of the overuse injuries. And I say overuse, you would think, well, if I'm doing more, I'd get more overuse. Well, no, you're building a base. Your pyramid can only be as high as the base is wide, right? So if you build that strong, big foundation, then putting in more and more miles, your body can handle it. And that's the other piece of information I can give is taking care of your body, resting and recovering as hard as you push. Chelsea, my wife, and I have built our business on that model. She was a high level runner herself. She ran for Florida State cross country and track, and then ran professionally for several years after college in Greenville here in South Carolina. After I left the hospital where I knew Katie, I stayed in Ottawa, but I went to the university there in town and became their strength coach and exercise physiology professor. And one of those things that I got to see there in the weight room at the college level, and Chelsea saw it there and in the pro level, is you can push yourself really hard throughout the week, running, cross training, doing what you're doing. But we also utilize all of the recovery tools that are available, ice baths, massages, lacrosse balls, foam rollers. I mean, there's a whole multitude of things that you can use based on what you need. And again, going back to that word personal training, I can't just say everyone should foam roll or everyone should use this. It'd be different for each person, what based your needs are. But recovering and making that every bit as important in your routine as the actual running. Those two things will allow your body to handle the pounding, the literal pounding of every step for miles and miles and miles and miles. I mean, there are a lot of runners that can go and train for this and then be ready to go a week or two after a marathon and be ready to start the next training block. There's some runners that can finish it with an okay time, but it's going to take 2 or 3 months for them to recover because they didn't do the work ahead of time.
Kyle acts like he knows something about this.
I almost feel personally attacked at this point.
Well, you feel that way because it's that common of a problem. Skipping those, I've only got a 3-miler today. I'm busy. I'll pick it up, or I'll add 1 mile to every other run this week, or, to make it up. And, that could work here and there, but consistently, especially a long 20-week or so or plus training block for a marathon, it'll add up, or in this case, take away.
See, what I'm taking from this is you said that we should get more massages. That's what I heard. That's right?
Oh, that's 100% correct. And
yes.
By massage, let me clarify.
Oh, okay.
Massage, which is greatly more uncomfortable than your regular massage. So,
what kind of massage? I did not hear that.
Sports massage.
Oh, well, fine.
So you see, all those little knots, those little trigger points you get in your neck and in your calves, quads, and glutes. Yeah, you get in right on it and push. And dig.
I don't know. That does not sound as fun as the massage I had in my head.
Yeah.
Oh, they're miserable / wonderful.
Right.
Sports massage.
They're miserable, but they work, and then you're like, okay, it was worth it.
Yep. They are really good. Pete, would you speak to, all the people, certainly this would not pertain to me even in the slightest, of the importance while you're building the base of that pyramid of stretching?
Yes. Huge. So we attack it a couple different ways. And this is going to be, I'm going to keep it very baseline level. And, if anyone ever wants to go into more depth or more detail, I'd be happy to provide more some other time or in different avenue. But before you run, do more of a dynamic warm up, which dynamic just means we're moving our body through a range of motion. We're not static stretching. We're not bending down, touching our toes and holding that. That we would want to do after we run. And that's going to be because our bodies are warm and loose and the most pliable we can be. And that's when we'll be able to stretch further than what we normally do. If we do the calisthenics kind of stuff, high knees, butt kicks, karaoke, any kind of hamstring pass-throughs or switches, all these things to fire these muscles to get them ready to run before you run, that's great. A little bit of foam rolling to help loosen the fascia that connects the skin to the muscle. That can be tight as well, especially around the heel cord or Achilles tendon. That's a good area to do. You don't want to spend hours on it, just a few passes, 6 to 10 passes on each body part. Doesn't take more than 3 or 4 minutes to foam roll everywhere that you need before the run. And then some of that dynamic warm up. But then stretching afterwards is important, whether that be standing and just, like I said, doing some static stretches, hamstring, quads, some of the basics, or doing like a yoga routine. And you can find routines that are based on runners, and they're going to be for your hip flexors, your hamstrings, glutes, quads, and then doing some heel cord work for the calves as well. So that's what I would do after the workout.
Right on. But you place high importance on those things.
Very high.
Have you found that, I know you've worked with runners, but do you find that runners are some of the most inflexible and rigid people you have ever met?
Yeah. Yes. And there is a reason for it. When you do all that pounding, your body has what they call mechanoreceptors in all your muscles. And there's muscle spindles and Golgi tendon organs. Again, I won't go any deeper than that to keep the listeners listening. But the idea is these receptors, when they sense changes in tension and length in your body, they send a signal to your spinal cord and to your brain to say, stop, don't do this. You're going to get hurt. Chill out. And so when you run and you have all that pounding, you're sending that signal over and over and over and over and over again. And so your body, you get used to it, and that's why you can continue to run. But it's the same thing. Like a good example would be like if you can bench press 200 pounds as a max, you're going to warm up for that. You're not going to go and say, okay, it's time to do my bench and put 200 pounds on the bar and go right to it. Even if you normally can hit it, you need to warm up. You have to tell your body, hey, this is what we're doing today. I'm going through this range of motion in my bench press, and you warm it up and you slowly override those mechanoreceptors. So a lot of runners, especially runners who then don't recover well by stretching and doing some of these things we've talked about, they send that signal to their body, but they never do anything after that to say, hey, it's okay. We can stretch past this. We can tolerate this. And so your body tightens up and tenses up. And over time, it just becomes really, really tight. A gentleman I worked with, his name is Charlie Gruber. He ran in the 2000 Sydney Olympics, a 1,500 meter runner. I worked with him when I was at the University of Kansas. We were looking at him stretching wise. He was an Olympic caliber runner, went to the Olympics, laying on his back, lifting up his leg, his hamstring. He couldn't even get to 45 degrees.
Sounds about like me.
Yeah, I mean, it was terrible, and the coaches were afraid that he was just going to pop a hamstring any moment now.
Right.
And so we would work and stretch, and I would push as hard as I could against that guy's leg, and he got better, but at the same time, he never was what I would deem flexible by any stretch,
right.
And yet he was a highly specialized runner. But I could make the argument. He's my age, so he's late 30s. No, I'm just kidding. He's mid 40s now.
Young buck.
He's probably got some low back pain. I would bet all kinds of money, even if he's still running. I haven't seen him since the year 2000, but I would bet if he hasn't addressed that, he's got some crazy low back pain these days.
So how does the low back pain come into this situation? Come into just the basic runner rigidness that a lot of us have?
So
I'm certainly guilty.
It's 100% related. Well, I shouldn't say 100%. It's most likely, and definitely in his case, 100% related to hamstring tightness and core stability. So weak abs, weak hip flexors, and tight hamstrings. So it's hard to describe, but without showing. But your pelvis is two different bones, and they come together in the back. In the front, the symphysis pubis on the back of the sacrum, and they can rotate independently of each other. And so if you have a tight hamstring, it can pull your hips back or pull one side back, and you can kind of have this corkscrewed hip position, which would sometimes protrude one leg a little bit longer. And the leg isn't necessarily longer, but it's just the way you're positioned now, it would jut out. And so that leg's going to take the brunt of the stride. That pain goes up the chain. The next stop after the hip is the low back.
Yep.
So that low back, because their hips aren't in proper alignment, can get a lot of overuse. The muscles, the culprit generally is a muscle we call the QL, the quadratus lumbarum. It will get overly worked and then just tighten up. And that's where a lot of the general low back tightness comes from. If we stretch the hamstrings and we take care of that mobility, going back to can't underscore that enough, a lot of those issues go away. And you do need to pair it with core stability, specific ab exercises, core progression to keep it from coming back. And going back to our original discussion, this is something, Katie, you may not recognize what I'm talking about, but I know Sauerman's progression for core stabilization. You and I did that endlessly. It was things, it's the one where you're on your back, tapping your foot, tapping your heel down. I know I had you do those 1,000 times, but that's the whole point. Was we can stretch the back. We can get those muscles to loosen up. We can stretch the hamstrings. But if we don't strengthen and we don't fix those problems, they're going to go right back to where they were over time. Maybe not right away, but they will eventually revert back.
The funny part of that is as soon as you said it, I sat up, kind of sucked in my core a little bit. I was like, wait, gosh, I should be doing something right now. He's taught me so many things, and yet I forget so often to do these things. And, and by the way, Mr. Pete, I want to say I'm a horrible friend, but happy birthday
Thank you.
His birthday was yesterday, so we're just gonna happy birthday to my friend Pete. Thank you so much for coming on. And I'm thinking, if Kyle gives us the good thumbs up, that we might have you on a couple times and we can talk more about training. And
you act like I get to make any decisions about this thing.
You make every decision.
This is all what producer Katie says. We are here but to serve producer Katie on the Back of the Pack podcast.
So I guess then, since I want you on the show now, we might even just take Kyle off a couple times and just and me riff now, because I really like this. I don't know that he's going to be able to take the microphone away from me now.
You should not have given her the microphone. With great power comes great responsibility, Katie. Yeah. You should know that.
I might have erred here. This might have been a big mistake.
And your listeners are thinking the same thing.
Well, the listeners, just to bring this up, are going to get to meet Katie at the Garmin Kansas City Marathon Expo, where we will have our table set up.
I thought we wanted people to come see us.
Well, after this episode, they're going to line up to meet you.
You're a celebrity now.
Well, I don't know about that.
Now there's two the talents on this show.
Ooh.
That's
right.
I
thought it was part of the talent before, but just kind of the unseen.
Different talent. Yeah.
All right. Well, with that, we're going to be at the Garmin Kansas City Marathon. And I really wish Pete was going to be here, but
South Carolina's a long way.
Yeah, South Carolina is a long ways away.
All right. Well, with that, we're going to go ahead and put a fork in this episode of the Back of the Pack podcast. We want to thank Pete. Pete is again with the Upstate Performance Project in South Carolina. I think we will definitely bug Pete more and have him back on the show. A big thank you to producer Katie for setting this all up and arranging this. This was all her. So we will see everybody at the expo. Everyone have a great weekend of training, and we will see you next time.
Thank you.